In today's episode, I'm going to teach you how to turn a bag full of sawdust into pretty good looking bases. One of my most favorite parts of working on an army is basing my models. A lot of tutorials will show you to do the basing at the end, and they take the effects paints from GW and they smear them all over the base, and then they put grass tufts on there, and then they call it good. And while I do like that look, I think that it is totally serviceable. I think it causes a couple different issues. A GW bottle is pretty expensive. I use Vallejo's Dark Earth or any of their textured paints. I personally really like that. For about the same price. It's like $10, I think, for a big tub of paint. It lasts you for forever. One of my first little tricks I like to do is, if I want to add texture to a base, I super glue a piece of cork. Never rip a square piece of cork, always kind of rip it from the middle so you get a little mound of rock out of it. It is extremely convincing. Here I mess up, and I left it in the video because I wanted to show you how easy it is to mess up. I use some activator to get the super glue to set up on that little rock that I put in there, and it's an oily substance, and I made the glue way too watery, and so it just pours right off the base, gets all over the place. So don't be like me. Left this in there for you. I added a lot more glue, like a ton more glue, and that seemed to work pretty well. Just paint it on the base and cover it up, and the glue I use is just regular PVA glue. I came into a full gallon jug of it from a picture frame shop that went out of business. If you notice here, the glue isn't all over the base. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to show you how to fix that here in just a second. Take your model, get some sawdust. This is like trick number one, and should be a big part of your hobby arsenal is sawdust. It's very easy to come by. If you got a friend with a wood shop, tell them to bag some of it up for you. If you live next to a picture frame shop or know one, after this whole quarantine thing is over, make friends. They'll give it to you for free because we make a lot of it. It will be a little contaminated. It won't be just clear, nice clean dirt, sawdust, but it'll be good. And then in those bare spots, I used the Dark Earth just to kind of fill in. And then I kind of moved on to the rest of the models. I don't waste a whole lot of time on this because there are so many things to do when you're building a full army. I tend to like to cut as many corners as possible. I have some friends who they build their armies. They don't paint, they don't prime, they don't base, they don't do any of this stuff. And for me, I have to. I think that it is a great way to get a awesome looking army on the table, really. Here I'm just kind of speeding it up for you to see like really how fast it is. Just get glue on there, and yeah, the video is sped up, but like I'm spending less than 30 seconds per model, and once you get into a good assembly line, you can just fly through it. That's why I like sawdust and PVA. The only real drawback with PVA is you should let it set up overnight minimum. 24 hours would be awesome, but I had, I think, over 80 models on the table that I just did this with one night. Took me a couple hours, did them all, and turned out all right. I prime everything. I think that doing a coat of primer is the smart thing to do. And then I go back with some Daler-Rowney Permanence Green ink and the Daler-Rowney Burnt Umber. They're two of my most favorite inks. Very easy to use. I typically try to keep them off my wet palette just because they get a little funky when you get them too wet. But I take a really destroyed brush and I start just dabbing ink all over the sawdust. Once the wood has been primed, it kind of gives you a nice mottled texture to your flocking. At this point, I think you could just call it flocking. And it absorbs the ink in different ways, so you can kind of push it around. I usually kind of start with a dark tone first and get it, wiped around in places. And then I just start dabbing in green, and you start getting these wonderful color collisions. And all of a sudden, this super gaudy green, that color green doesn't exist in grass. It's completely unrealistic. As soon as it mixes in with the black Steinel res, the burnt umber, it really looks beautiful. And it's just subtle and easy. I mean, and that's some of the problem with like your heavy texture paints, is that they're a little too much. Like, I don't think I could ever just leave dark earth as my base color. I would always have to go in and give it a wash or a dry brush or something to make it a little bit more interesting, because they just look too fake. So that's why I like doing it this way. It's super cheap. A bottle of that ink is nothing. I think I spent $20 on 6 bottles of your basic inks, and then sawdust is free and glue is super cheap, and they'll last you for forever. You will be using this stuff. I think I've had this for over a year, and look how good that looks. It's just dirt and grass. It looks like a battlefield. Do the same on this guy. Look out for their feet. You're going to get stuff on them, but it doesn't really matter, because in a mass army game like Conquest: Last Argument of Kings, nobody's looking at the feet. You have so many models on the table. Game moves so fast. You really just are trying to help up the ante of the illusion. There is no, I need to get this thing looking the most perfect, because these guys will get on the table while the Steel Legion are pretty vicious on the table. They can get taken out. Next step, dry brushing. Easily one of the most overused tools in miniature painters' arsenals. But on basing and stuff, I actually think it's really good. I use Army Painter's Arid Earth as my dry brush paint. It's a really nice pale yellow. I still use it, even though I use Pro Acryl paint for literally everything else. This Army Painter Arid Earth, I love how it dry brushes. I like to work it into my brush pretty liberally. I want every angle to have a little bit of paint, but then I go through and I heavily wipe off the dry brush, so it's barely on there. Test it on my skin. If it's grabbing on my skin, it's too much. Go back to the paper and start hitting the base, and just do a nice light dry brush over it. Hit it from all different angles, and that way, no matter which direction you're looking at it from, the base looks nice and evenly brushed. And as you can see here coming up, once you get all your models into the little stands, you do this dry brush on all the models. It looks great. It is super easy. Oh yeah, always paint your rims black. It drives me crazy. This is like my one pet peeve. If you don't paint your rims at least a solid color and you just leave them with like paint and everything going over, it's just like you ate spaghetti and you didn't wipe the spaghetti sauce off your face. It drives me absolutely crazy when I see that. It takes 2 seconds to go through and paint your bases black. Do it on your stands. There you go. There's your models. I think they look really sweet. And it just kind of, like I said, ups the illusion. We're all sitting here playing these games just like anybody else. And that little bit of effort helps the person across the table feel like you did the things necessary to make them enjoy the game as much as possible. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really love basing. I love talking about basing. I'll do a more in-depth look, but if you're just basing an army, why put all that effort? Let's do something easy. Thanks for joining me in the Murder Basement. We'll see you next time. Thank you for watching another episode of Hobby Time in the Murder Basement. I so appreciate your support. If you could go ahead and give this video a like, subscribe to my channel, share it with your friends, leave a comment, literally do anything that you can to help get this channel a little bit more traction. I'd really appreciate it. I hate when channels ask every single episode for this. It becomes mundane and monotonous. So I figured I'd just record one of these. That way you only have to hear me do this once, just at the end of every one of my videos. I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next video.